What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have several areas of interest to talk about today. We have this area of interest right here in the main development region starting to get its act together. We have this area of interest off the coast of Texas that is showing signs of development and potentially bringing a lot of rain over there. And we have this tropical wave currently out here in the eastern main development region that is also looking at potentially organizing and developing all stuff the National Hurricane Center is paying attention to. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Here's what we have with the latest from the National Hurricane Center. 3 areas of interest have now been tagged, ladies and gentlemen. This is pretty interesting to see what's been going on, and it's, wow, it's just seeing all this firing off in the last few days has been pretty incredible, as everyone was saying, oh, this season's going to be a bust. Well, we now have 3 areas of interest for you to go over, so let's go ahead and talk about that. Obviously, the first area of interest that we're paying attention to is this one over here, expected to enter the Caribbean Sea. Shower and thunderstorm as associated with a tropical wave over the central tropical Atlantic remain disorganized. Gradual development for the system is possible during the next few days, and a tropical depression could form at the same time at some time next week while it moves westward, reaching the Lesser Antilles on Monday and continuing across the the Caribbean Sea through the middle to later part of next week. 40% chance of development in the next 7 days, 0% in the next 48 hours. I am kind of interested as to why they dropped the 10% and lowered it to 40% at this current point. I would have held it at 50, but I can definitely see why they dropped the 10% to near 0. I would have personally held it at 50 based on the interest and the model it runs, based on how the system is going. Yes, it has lost a lot of its convective flair, but it's more than likely going to get some ground game, and it's more than likely going to get that back sooner rather than later. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, kind of an interesting comment to take a look at. But we'll pay attention to it. That's why we're here. We just keep an eye on things, and we will continue to. But here's this one off the coast of Texas. A surface trough of low pressure over the northwestern Gulf of Mexico is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms along and just offshore of the coast of Texas and Louisiana. This system is expected to meander near the coast throughout much of the week, and some development of the some slow development is possible if it remains offshore. Regardless of development, heavy rains could cause some flash flooding across portions of coastal Louisiana and the upper Texas coast during the next few days. 10% probability of formation in the next 48 hours, 20% in the next 7 days. So that's something we're going to have to keep tabs on, more or less so on the flash flooding threat. And we were kind of talking about this, and the icon definitely was picking up on it. And I know a lot of us were probably saying, oh, this thing's probably not going to develop. This thing's probably not going to even be an AOI. Well, it's an area of interest now, so here we go. Things are going to get interesting. And then we have this area of interest that's currently near the Cabo Verde Islands. Another tropical wave between the west coast of Africa and Cabo Verdes is producing minimal shower and thunderstorm activity. Some slow development of the system is possible through late next week while it moves slowly to the west-northwest over late next week, while it moves slowly to the west-northwest over the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days, and that's definitely something we're going to have to watch and be a little bit concerned about. But ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 areas of interest to watch across much of the Caribbean, across the, matter of fact, the entire Atlantic basin. So all that activity that was going on in the Eastern Pacific, well, it looks like it's migrated right over here, and now we're going to start seeing a bunch of activity starting up very shortly. So we're going to have to keep very close tabs on it, and let's go ahead and show you the satellite imagery and kind of give you a quick update of what we're looking at. Let's go ahead and start with the system that's currently off the coast of Texas, because that does pose the greatest threat to land for now. Here's what we have. Overall, it's relatively disorganized showers and thunderstorms. There's a lot of convection firing up in that part of the Gulf of Mexico. However, it's very disorganized. It's more or less mesoscale. in mesoscale in nature. It was mesoscale in nature. It's going to be potentially synoptic in nature if it continues growing in size. Synoptics, for those of you who do not know, that's basically, in layman's terms, any system or any weather event that expands greater than 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles. So I just thought I'd give you that quick lesson right there. So that's what we're looking at. It's still seeing a lot of convection firing up on the northwestern part of the Gulf of Mexico. If that continues over the next several days, that might end up cooling down a lot of the sea surface temperatures, which would be some good news for Texas and western Louisiana if that were the case. However, based on what we're looking at, it definitely is firing up a bunch of convection. It's just not organizing right now, and that's kind of the saving grace that we have so far with the system being slow to develop. It is over very weak wind shear, I will give it that, and the moisture component has been really interesting to say the very least, and it's over a lot of warm water. It's just the system needs to get out of its own way if it wants to organize and develop, and that's what we're paying attention to. But ultimately, the main threat for right now is going to be flash flooding, and it's going to be potentially some gusty winds, especially on the Texas and Louisiana coast, so we're going to have to keep tabs on it. Here's what the main meat of the video is going to be on, though. We have this area of interest currently over in the main development region, and we have this area of interest over near the Cabo Verde Islands. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this in the central Atlantic. Here's what we have. Still showing a lot of fight, showing a lot of rotation, really organizing and developing. But David was kind of talking about this. David Schlauhauer was talking about this. There are two areas of vorticity going on. One over here where the main system is, and another one where this convection is a little bit further to the west of it. Based off of what I'm seeing, it looks like those two could possibly merge, which would take a longer time for this system to organize and develop, and probably won't do so if that were the case until it moved past the Lesser Antilles. But ultimately, that is another concern of mine, at least long-term, because of how good the conditions are in the Caribbean Sea, and we'll have to pay attention to that for sure. But ultimately, we are starting to see that vorticity close in quite a bit more, and it's going to really depend if which vorticity is going to take over. Is going to be this area of rotation or this area of convection that's starting to really ramp up. So we're going to have to pay attention. Once again, we have the area of interest just to the east of that in the eastern Atlantic. Over here, we have this just south of the Cabo Verde Islands. We're seeing a lot of stuff firing off over there. It's not really as organized or pronounced as what we were seeing a couple of days ago, but is still showing some fight in it. And we're going to have to keep tabs on it. I'm more concerned with this with the shipping threat as well as the threat to the Cabo Verde Islands. But ultimately, that's what we're paying attention to. All three areas of interest are really showing that flare that we were waiting for the entire season. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the water vapor imagery that we have pulled up right here. Let's go ahead and start with the true color. True color, what are we looking at right now? We're looking at pretty much a bunch of signs that the Atlantic is waking up. We already have three areas of interest once again in the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to have to pay attention to that, obviously. Let's go ahead and show you the water vapor imagery right here. Here's what we have with the water vapor. Once again, the system in Texas over here. A lot of moist air that I can work with. I'm not too concerned about it. But I am going to be mainly focusing on the AOI currently in the central main development region, and you'll find out why in a second. Here's the water vapor imagery. Where it's at right now, it's in an area of very moist air. Yes, there is some dry air to the east of it that could hinder its development initially, but based on everything I'm paying attention to, it's staying just outside of it, and the wind shear is north of it to keep any of that dry air from intruding into the system, which would ultimately be a bit of a problem looking into this. Also noticing on this water vapor, we're seeing a lot more outflow on both areas now than what we were seeing last night. We were starting to see the beginning stages of outflow last night on stream, and now we are looking at a much more defined area of outflow as this system starts to organize and develop, and it's mainly concentrated around this mass of convection over here, which what that is ultimately telling me at this current rate is that is the dominant vorticity, and this vorticity over here is the secondary one. Depending on how this executes itself and how the whole system will end up developing, will really be telling, will this larger area of vorticity allow for maybe maybe the system to be to merge and develop quicker if it gets its act together, or will it take more time because it's going to end up adding some strength that needs to consolidate? Those are the main things we're paying attention to, and that's going to kind of be very prevalent in terms of determining the threat for the Lesser Antilles, because if it does the latter and it takes more time to develop, the Windward Islands are going to get impacted, but they're not going to get nearly as impacted as what some models were concerned about last night. That being said, that poses a more of a long-term threat, because once it enters the Caribbean, it's going to be entering some really good conditions in terms of moisture, in terms of vorticity, advection, in terms of warm water, in terms of wind shear. And from then on out, it could take its time doing that and organizing and developing as it moves through there. Similar situation happened with Hurricane Ian back in 2022, where it started off like a wave just like this one out here in the Atlantic, and then it moved into the Caribbean Sea and started to organize and develop as it started showing signs that it was going to be impacting Florida. So that's another scenario we're looking at this current point in time. Maybe this doesn't develop until it moves past the Lesser Antilles, which is becoming a more of a likely scenario. But ultimately, the next 24 hours are what's going to determine how the system will play out, and we will keep you updated on that. So that's the main thing we're looking at with this area of interest in terms of water vapor. Right now, it's going to be in great conditions for several days, at least until it gets to the central Caribbean Sea, where conditions do get a little bit more iffy for reasons we will explain in a little bit. Not iffy in the terms of, it's not going to be favorable for development, but iffy in the terms of how favorable we're going to see. And we can kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what we're taking a look at. Let's go ahead and start with the sea surface temperatures right here. I'm going to try to pull up a new map very quickly, see if we can get those. I really hope we do. I guess, unfortunately, not. I guess the website really isn't doing that much with that. But regardless of that, we do have this map right here, sea surface temperatures, and I'm comfortable enough using this map solely, mainly because this is where the action is going to be in terms of this area of interest, as well as the area of interest off the coast of Texas. Now, of course, there is one out over here, but ultimately what I'm paying attention to, at least for the greater threat for land, are these areas of interest. So here's what we have going on right now. Where this system is at, it's in an area of about 29 degrees Celsius waters. That's that's a lot of warm water that I can work with where this area of interest is, and it's something that scares the absolute crap out of me because you have all that moisture, you have very warm water. The only thing that the system can do to sabotage itself is if it gets in its own way. And it likely will get in its own way, at least initially, until it enters the Caribbean Sea. And from then on out, what do we see? Isolated areas of 30-plus degrees Celsius waters over here, and then a much larger tub of 30-plus degrees Celsius. For those of you who do not know how hot 30 degrees Celsius waters are, that is 86-plus degrees Fahrenheit. And those waters go down very deep as well. That's why I am concerned about this, because not only are the water temperatures very warm on the surface, they're very warm very deep down. Let's go ahead and show you the ocean heat content. Here's the OHC map we have pulled up for you. Where this Caribbean is at right now, we are seeing record-breaking levels of OHC. The OHC is through the roof in the Western Caribbean Sea, and arguably it's through the roof, climatologically speaking, across the entire Caribbean, across the Gulf of Mexico, and across much of the main development region, and even in the subtropical Atlantic. That is right there something you need to pay attention to, because where the system is at right now, it's an area of about 75-ish OHC. That's going to spike up to over 100. And considering what will happen tonight, potentially we'll have to see if convection starts to fire up again. And if it's really deep convection where it really starts to sustain itself and it starts to get the ball rolling, that's when it's go time. That's when the system's going to start really ramping up in organization. And if it does it before we get into that huge area of OHC, that raises some very big red flags for me, mainly because of the kind of the possibilities it has. David was talking about this. This system has a very high ceiling in terms of intensification. This whole map explains why. There is so much OHC that has been untapped since October of last year that another barrel is very possible at this current point. Now, granted, I'm not saying it's going to happen. Things are subject to change, but it's definitely a possibility we need to look out for. Let's go ahead and show you the wind shear map at this current point. Wind shear, look what's going on across the entire Caribbean Sea. Very low wind shear. There is a little bit of wind shear to the north and south of this area of interest. That's not going to sustain for a while. As soon as it enters this part of the MDR and then enters the Caribbean Sea, it's going to have insanely good conditions throughout. And this is why I said the conditions are going to be a bit more iffy. They're not going to be iffy as in, are they going to be bad or not? They're going to be iffy in terms of how good are they going to be. This reminds me of a Hurricane Lee style setup, except this is going to be impacting the Caribbean Sea. Because we saw stuff exactly like this. We saw wind shear just really good for several days. Now, one area of wind shear doesn't determine anything, but this gives you a general pattern of the wind shear right here, and there's not a lot of it in the system's path. And that's what's scaring me at this current rate. Now, and it's also scaring me in terms of what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico with that area of interest over there, where it's sitting at, it's sitting over OHC of around, I'd say 100 or so just to the south of it, which if it pushes a little bit further to the south and uses that low wind shear and moisture to get its act together, it could potentially get up to strong tropical storm status, at least at the very peak. And I know the icon run was indicating that last night, and of course we're going to have to pay attention to that. But it's just something in a scenario that we need to watch and kind of prepare for just in case things go haywire. So that's what we're looking at in terms of wind shear. Here are the ensembles that we can pull up for you right here. Let me go ahead and move the screen a little bit further to the left right here. These are the 0Z European ensembles. Every single one of them want this to enter the Caribbean Sea. There are a couple of weak exceptions, but this is a concerning situation I am looking at right now. And also another thing I'm concerned about is these are going to be very strong ensembles as well. Some of them have it entering the Gulf of Mexico as a major hurricane. Considering we know how the Gulf of Mexico works nowadays, where it ends up being a massive boost to hurricane strength instead of a bit of a deterrent, similar to what we were seeing with at the early 2000s and the early 2000 and mid 2010s. We're seeing a situation now where this could end up organizing and developing very quickly and potentially get up to major hurricane strength, according to some of these ensembles, enter the Gulf of Mexico, and then impact the Gulf states. Now, there has been some scenarios of this system instead heading for Belize or Mexico and then turning a bit to the north and potentially impacting the northern part of Mexico or Texas. But for now, those are in the minority, but I have seen an increase of ensembles, so it's something I wanted to highlight and something I wanted to pay attention to. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS ensembles. They are a little bit more interesting. They are trying to get their act together. Here's the 0Z GFS ensembles for you right here. They are a bit more scattered. They've been kind of off and on, off and on. 6Z ensembles still not showing the full picture. Pulling up the 12Z ensembles as well. Yeah, they are showing a little bit more of a picture, but the GFS ensembles have been been sleeping on this, whereas every single other track and every single other model has been saying, oh my goodness, we need to pay attention to this right here. We got to take this very seriously. And that's ultimately the message I have for you guys. We need to take this very seriously. This has the possibility to impact tens of millions of people. We're showing you a couple of operational runs. The icon potentially wants this to impact Haiti. The European, let's go ahead and show you the 0Z European. The 0Z European has been pretty interesting. Has the system impacting Belize as a tropical storm? Have to pay attention to that. Depends on the steering currents. If we go ahead and show you the CMC, 12Z run wants it to impact in the Bay of Campeche, whereas the 0Z didn't really have too much. So ultimately, what I'm looking at is the operational runs need some more time to catch up, but they are starting to, and that's why we need to pay attention. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be it for this video today. First of all, Thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. I'm going to be making another video talking about that this weekend, saying kind of expressing my gratitude. That'll probably be out tomorrow. But thank you for 10,000 subscribers. That is absolutely unbelievable, and I could not be more thankful for you guys doing that and giving me the chance to forecast and giving me the chance to kind of show what I have to present. Also, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. Link to that is right over in the end screen. Shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor channel. If you want to be an official sponsor as well, be sure to join the Patreon. Link is in the description down below. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Let's see if we can get up to 20,000 subscribers by the end of September. That would be pretty fun, though, but it's a bit of a stretch. But with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.